Option classes are used in conjunction with the options that are set at the server level, the scope level, or the client level to subdivide the options that are set by those things. There are two option classes that you need to be familiar with. They are vendor classes and user-defined classes. The vendor classes are used to identify specific operating systems or specific vendor software. For example, you might use a vendor class so that you hand out a WINS address, a Windows Internet Name Server address, to Windows 98 computers, but not to any other computers, any other DHCP clients of your DHCP server. User-defined classes are, just as the name would imply, custom defined, and you might use this to identify specific computers, say in a department such as the sales department or on the floor of a building, so that they get specific options either from a scope or from the server itself. So the things you need to be familiar with for purposes of this module here is how to identify and define some of these things and how to configure client computers to use the option classes. To define the option classes, you'll open up the DHCP console and then right-click on the server you're configuring and define either user or vendor classes. The vendor classes, again, notice some of these are predefined Windows 2098 options so that clients of a certain operating system can be configured to get a specific option. You can define your own by defining user classes, and there are a couple predefined ones here. To add to either of these, simply click on Add. The display name, maybe call it Sales, and then down here in the Value area of this New Class dialog box, just enter in the ASCII text that's going to be associated with this class, and then the binary is configured for you. So click on OK, and you've just configured a new user class. Now, in order to take advantage of one of these classes, the client, the DHCP client, must first identify itself as being a member of the option class. Some of this happens automatically, but otherwise you need to use the utility ipconfig with the set class ID switch. And to do that, you first need to open up a command prompt to use ipconfig, and the way it works is like this. ipconfig, you can also use it with a switch called show class ID, and then I'm just going to pause and type this. It's hard to type and talk at the same time, but I quote local area connection. That's the name of the adapter for which I want to show the class ID. And if I've typed everything correctly, quote it because it has spaces in it, by the way. Processing, querying, and at the end of this, you'll receive a message that looks like this. No class is defined, if indeed none have been defined for the adapter. To set the class ID, that's the switch. ipconfig, set class ID for the connection, and then the value. So now I'm setting a class ID for that local area connection. So again, I press enter, and if things are typed correctly, processing, and we've successfully set the class ID for the adapter local area connection. Now, this computer, by the way, isn't a DHCP client, so it can't really make use of these. It won't make use of these classes. So if I were to run this again, it will say no classes are defined. But nonetheless, this is the process that you would use at a client computer that would identify itself to the DHCP server. Now, to actually make use of these options or these option classes, go back to your DHCP console, and now for maybe the scope options, I will right-click on the scope options, configure options, and now from the advanced tab, I should be able to choose user class, sales class. I want them to have a specific time server or a specific name server or a specific DNS server, and so on and so on. So this is how you would use these user classes. So once a DHCP client identifies itself as a member of one of these classes, it will then get these very specific options that you can configure. It's all about automating as much as possible the configuration of IP at a client computer.